Book 5, Plato's Republic. So, Book 5 starts with a discussion of the role of women in the Republic. And interestingly, Socrates turns out to be a kind of early feminist. Now let me preface this by saying he is not as advanced with respect to women's rights as our own contemporary culture is. But given his day and age, his views on women in the workplace were much more progressive than anyone else's. So he is a little bit ahead of his own time with respect to women getting out of the kitchen and getting into the workplace. So, does Socrates believe that female guardians should wage war and defend the city, like the males? Or does he believe their role is to stay behind and take care of the pups? And the answer was clear. He says that there can be female guardians and there can be male guardians. There's nothing about female human nature that disqualifies them from guardianship. So theoretically, you could have a female queen of the Republic. Now, at the same time, he does say that men and women develop differently, and that if it comes down to a matter of who can produce X amount of tables in Y amount of time, sometimes the males can do it better. But then he says some women can do some jobs better than any men can. You can't make sweeping generalizations about an entire class based on their gender and say that all females can't do certain tasks. The argument you could say for him is that statistically it is more likely that a male could perform this task more efficiently than a female could, but that does not mean that there aren't perhaps some females who could do that task better than any male could. So you have to evaluate each individual as an individual and not group them together by classes. This is why he was a little bit more progressive. He does say men tend to do things better, and in that way he's not progressive, right? He's still a little bit old-fashioned. But then he, in the very next breath, says, they tend to, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some women who could do all jobs better than any man can. So, should we educate them like the men? Of course we should. You won't have a curriculum in college designed for females and then one designed for males. Because before they're male or female, they're human. And all humans have natural talents. Your natural talents aren't gender determined. Not for sure, right? So that if you are a female with an aptitude for warfare, you will join the military. If you're a female who's an aptitude for art, you'll be an artist, and the like. Your sex is irrelevant to your particular diamond for him. And since education is specific to diamonds, then obviously education is generalized, irregardless of sex. Now, with that comes the awkward part, right? Females are going to be expected to do everything that the males do. In some, does he believe that female human nature is capable of sharing with the males all tasks, no tasks, or some but not others? And the answer is all tasks. And there you have it. Okay, this is a kind of a strange section where he returns to the idea of the guardians having private families. And he says they can't marry, nor can they raise their own children. And the reason for this is that he believes the private family would represent a conflict of objectivity, so that they would start using their power to make their decisions for the whole community table based on the interests of their own children. And once you do that, you have a guardian who's working against the reason he exists. Doctors don't exist to serve themselves, they exist to serve the patient. Similarly, golds don't exist to advance their own children with their power. They exist to serve the interests of the community table by making laws that keep that table as healthy as possible. The moment a gold or silver is able to raise their own kids, the argument is they will abuse their power. So in advance, he forbids them from having families at all. He has this sort of early eugenics program that is definitely a little bit sketchy. The idea is that we want to make sure that the strongest and the smartest are always the ones having the kids. So anybody can have sex, but you have the right to produce children if you have the desirable traits. And that sounds a little bit Nazi-like, and maybe it is. Like I said, eugenics isn't always bad, though. Like if you can cure certain genetic disorders in utero, why wouldn't you? That's an ethical issue, though. Some people say that it goes against some divine right or how God wanted you to be. From Socratic perspective, if somebody has a potential diamond that could be definitely helped while still in utero or by good breeding practices, then why wouldn't you help them? It would be how he would come down on that. Okay, so they don't get to raise their own kids, but they're relocated and they're raised by the state until they demonstrate their strengths, and then they're put into their proper class. Remember, 2 golds don't necessarily generate a gold. Statistically, they might, more probably, but there's no guarantee. 2 bronzes can produce a gold. 2 golds can produce a bronze. There's no guarantee that your class will be the class that your parents was in. One of the major implications of these breeding regulations are that the guardians start to view things as one. He says the best ordered city is the one in which the greatest number of citizens use the expression mine and not mine about the same things in the same way. So unlike it stands today, where private families are pitted against each other for finite resources. So sort of like if one of you has a child who's salutatorian and the other child is going to be valedictorian of high school, and the valedictorian child has a nervous breakdown. That family's distress and pain is actually pleasure and success for the other family. This is inevitable. When private families are pitted against one another for finite resources, one family's pain translates into another's pleasure. They don't feel pain and pleasure as one, they feel them at each other's expense. Socrates does not think that mentality produces an effective guardian class. The likelihood would be that the silvers are pitted against each other to become gold, and most of the people who do the dying in those wars historically are the bronzes, when the aristocrats conscript the bronzes and force them to fight each other. That produces a poorly functioning community table. Some advantages of this obviously is that they will learn to feel pleasure and pain as one, so that when any child succeeds, they will all feel pleasure. When any child falls down, they will all feel pain. He sees this as a kind of team mentality, where you rejoice as a team, you suffer as a team, but never at the expense of other members on that team. Okay, moving forward. According to Socrates, what must happen if the city-state of Greece has become similar to the ideal city? So he's talking about transforming an existing community, perhaps into a utopia. And this is where he gets kind of sketchy. He says, unless either philosophers become kings, or those whom we now call kings become philosophers, that the pursuit of philosophy and political power need to be joined together. Until that happens, there can be no stop to the trouble of mankind or the human race. So who do the golds turn out to be? They turn out to be philosophers. Now, you should be suspicious at this, because Thrasymachus argued that justice is nothing but strong people using strength to preserve their own strength. So Socrates, it's kind of sketchy that you're saying philosophers should be kings, because aren't you doing exactly what Thrasymachus said, right? That you're saying that give me the power so I can make laws for the sake of myself. So we're going to have to figure out why he thinks philosophers should, why they qualify for rule. So he's going to have to talk about the legitimacy of the philosopher king or queen. Now, how does he do? Just remember, Glaucon actually threatens here, right? In your book, he says, Socrates, if you speak like this, you can't be surprised when good, decent folks roll their sleeves up, pick up the nearest weapon, and come and attack you. Right? You can't build our hopes up with this all talk of justice and wisdom and virtue and then just say, hand me the crown because I'm your rightful king. So Socrates is going to have to defend this statement. Okay, how does the defense come? Books 5.5, 6, and 7 of the Republic are all about drawing the distinction between knowledge and opinion. So the way that we use those words today is not the way that they were originally meant. Sometimes what we call knowledge, Socrates would call opinion. And he's going to make the argument that philosophers, represented by the golds, but that even individually, that your philosophical self should be, which is the rational element, that philosophers, or the philosophical part of you, is the part that should be ruling the society or the individual psyche. Why? Because it is capable of knowledge rather than opinion. Now he's going to have to defend that statement. So what is the difference between knowing and opining, or between knowledge and opinion? So it is by our knowing faculty that we come to know reality, and it's by our opining or belief-making faculty that we come to have beliefs about reality. But what is the difference between knowledge and opinion? Plato argues that the proper object of knowledge is being. That is, if knowledge is directed at being, and ignorance is directed at non-being, then this thing, opinion, is going to lie somewhere in between, and will be directed at objects that are in a state of becoming. It is precisely because physical objects are in a state of becoming, or a state of flux, that they cannot be known, only opined at. In sum, knowledge pertains to objects that are in a state of being, while opinion pertains to objects that are in a state of becoming. Now I'm going to try to explain this, and this is abstract, alright? So you may need to listen to this a couple of times. If I asked you what beauty was, many of you would list examples. Beauty is a baby's laugh, is a bride on her wedding day, is a sunset on the beach. If I asked you what courage was, you may reply, courage is overcoming an addiction, courage is dying for your country, courage is running to a burning building. Here's the problem. You would have listed examples of beauty and examples of courage. What you did not state is what the thing is they are examples of, which would be beauty itself and courage itself. Socrates argues that opinions are based off of our particular experiences of beauty and courage. But to know beauty and courage would be to know what they are, insofar as they are distinct and different from the ways we experience them. So you would take a beautiful person, a beautiful sunset. Why are they beautiful? Plato would argue, because they possess the quality of beauty. To know beauty would mean to use the rational element to extract that objective quality out of the particular manifestation, which of course is the face and the sunset. You use reason and philosophy to extract beauty itself out of it and then define it in isolation, apart from the ways you experience it subjectively. Now, if you do this, and if I do this, the argument would be that we would be looking at the same thing. That beauty is an objective, self-sustaining entity. That it exists apart from what we experience in it in. So you can have beauty that manifested 3,000 years ago in China, or 5,000 years in the future on Mars. Plato would say the same thing. It's beauty itself manifesting itself in a multiplicity of ways. So it presents differently, but yet it is the same quality that is presenting in different ways. And the same goes for courage, or justice, or even what it means to be a human being. You have a lot of different humans. They don't have anything the same. Their properties are different, they look different, skin color, DNA. What is it about them that makes them what they are? Plato would say it's because they possess the quality of humanity. And that quality presents itself differently in different particular manifestations. But it is a quality that has an identity and that can be known. Knowledge is of things that are in a state of being, while opinions are directed at things in a state of becoming. Everything in the material universe is in a state of becoming, because all matter is. And for that very reason, conclusions based on physical experiences are only opinions.